Daniel. We're going to finish chapter 6 and then go into chapter 7 tonight. So if you want to turn over there. Okay. What had we seen happen with Daniel and them trying to accuse him in his co-workers trying to accuse him? What did we see? Okay, the king made a law, and why did the king make a law? Yes, his wise men tricked him into doing it, and he regretted his decision, but it was too late. And what did Daniel do? He continued to pray. That's what we ended with last week, was he didn't start a new ritual just to fight the law. This was what he's always done. And let's start there. So, Daniel chapter 6. I think we're about verse 14. Then the king, when he heard these words, was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel. And he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. Then these men came by agreement to the king and said to the king, Know, O king, that it is the law of the Medes and the Persians that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed. Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. The king declared to Daniel, May your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you. We're going to stop there. So, we're on Roman numeral 4 if you're taking notes. His co-workers and his boss knew his God. His co-workers knew his God, so they knew how to try to attack him. And his boss knows his God, and how do we know that his boss knows his God? Okay, yeah, his father knew his God. How does his boss know that Daniel has a God? Because of what does he say to him when he's thrown into the lion's den? May your God deliver you. And we're skipping ahead. We haven't read this yet, but the next day, the king is expectant that maybe his God did deliver him. So the king at this point has some understanding of not only Daniel's faith, but even the power of Daniel's God. They all knew his belief, but he didn't cause problems in the workplace. He had never caused any issues, but his faith was common knowledge. And how did they finally get a problem? They had to invent a problem. So he goes in and day out, making his faith known to his coworkers, yet not causing problems at work. And they had to come up with and invent a problem for there to be a problem. So there's a good lesson in here. We take a lot of lessons away from Daniel in the lion's den, but make sure we only take the lessons that are actually written there. A lot of times we can get very rebellious when we read this story, like, yeah, fight the man. We're going to go and we're going to cause problems at work. No, he never caused problems. They all knew his faith. The only time there was a problem was when they caused the problem. All right, point number 5. He is delivered. Let's read. Verse 17, And a stone was brought and laid on the mouth of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet, and with the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. This lion's den is a little bit interesting. It doesn't seem to be what we would find naturally. Naturally, if you were going to find a den of animals, there would be a cave, maybe, and one entrance. But this reminds us of something else. Do you remember with the fiery furnace? How many entrances were there to the fiery furnace? At least 2. What were the 2? one on top and one they could see through like a door. Well, it seems the same way with this den, because when he's sealing this, it's like he's sealing the door of a cave, you might think of, but then later when he's punishing other people, he throws them in through the top, which the book of Daniel has a lot of times where it feels like Daniel's life repeats itself. So there's some similarities between what happened to his three friends and what's happening to him. What does the king do with his signet? He seals it. What did the king want to do with Daniel? Save him. The king knows now it's the law and he has to do it. And so he seals it. And this reminds us, what other cave with a stone in front of it is sealed in the Bible? Jesus' tomb. What was the purpose behind that? The government sealing it. So no one could steal his body and say he was raised. This would be the same purpose. It's being sealed so no one can save Daniel. No human can get in there to save Daniel. And I could see where the king would want that night, while everyone's asleep, to send one of his soldiers and take Daniel out of the cave, but he has to seal it. And once he's sealed it, even the king can't go in. Then the king went to his palace and spent the night fasting. Now that's interesting. In the Old Testament, when you find fasting mentioned, what is that a synonym or often used with? What is the other word normally used with fasting? Prayer. So we don't know what this king believed. We know he's got some belief about God. Maybe he was even praying, because fasting and prayer tend to come hand in hand. Now read what he doesn't do. No diversions were brought to him. I'm used to reading this from the New King James. Does anybody have a different word than diversions? Entertainment. So he is not sleeping good that night, and sleep fled from him. And when a king's not sleeping, they bring in any type of thing that might help him through the night. You can imply what you wish with that. This could be something to help him go to sleep. Some people believe the entertainment is that he did not let any prostitutes come into him that night. Let's go down that route. That's kind of conjecture, I think, some commentators, but let's go down that route. That's another form of fasting, right? Fasting means you give up all pleasures, and you're only focused on what typically in the Bible? God and prayer. We don't know that he was focused on God or prayer, but he was fasting. He gave up everything that night because he wanted God to save Daniel. Let's read. Next morning. Then at the break of day. Does that remind you of something else? We were talking about another thing that was sealed. What was the other thing that was sealed? Jesus' tomb. And what did they do at the break of day? They went running there to see. As soon as the break of day on Sunday morning, they ran to the tomb. At the break of day, the king arose and went in haste to the den of lions. And as he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared Daniel, he doesn't know Daniel's alive on the other side because he's in anguish. He's upset. O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions? He has no clue what's behind the door. Then Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him, and also before you, O king. I have done no harm. Now, why was Daniel in the lion's den? For praying. And why does praying get you in the lion's den? Okay. The king ordered him not to pray. Yet, how does Daniel say that God found him? Innocent before who? God and the king. So God looked on Daniel's situation and realized that the king never wanted this. He was tricked. He was duped. Then the king was exceedingly glad. We'll stop there. All right, point number 5. He was delivered by an angel. Now let's read the rest of this paragraph, and then we'll answer number 5, part 2. Then the king was exceedingly glad and commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him. Notice that phrase. Because he had trusted in his God. And the king commanded, and those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions. They, their children, and their wives. And before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. This is how you know there's 2 entrances, because it says before they reached what? The bottom. So they were thrown in from the top. Yeah, GW?
That's kind of hard for me to understand, really, the family destroyed with them.
Yes.
It's beyond my understanding, because that seems to go against what God really does.
Correct.
But he must have had a reason, but I don't understand what it was.
Okay. Who did it? Who threw them in the lion's den? The king. This does go against what God teaches. So in God's law, God taught that the child is not to be punished for the parent. Now, that was taught throughout the Old Testament. It was a rule for God's people, for Israel, for the kingdom of God. But that was not the rule for other kingdoms. That's one of the things that made God's kingdom special. Other kingdoms always taught the sins of the father are the sins of the son. But God taught you don't inherit your father's sins. You're not punished for what your dad did. So yes, this was the king doing this, not God's law. God's law did not allow this. Thank you for bringing that out. All right, so what I want us to notice is, let's compare his deliverance to his friends in chapter 3. Let's start off with differences. Let's start off with the king. In chapter 3, how did the king interact with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do what? Okay. How did he feel when they broke his law? He was extremely angry. So there's the first difference. In chapter 3, the king wanted to destroy them. With Daniel here, the king did not want to destroy. All right. In chapter 3, what did the king see inside the furnace? He saw 4. So the fourth being some spiritual being, Jesus or an angel. Here, what delivered Daniel? An angel, but did the king see it? No. The king had no clue what was going on inside the den. He didn't know if Daniel was alive or dead. So there's a difference. The king didn't know, the king did know. Now let's go to similarities. How did it describe Daniel when he came out? Verse 23. Unscathed. The exact same description we have of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It said they didn't have any smell of smoke. They didn't have, same description. They came out and they didn't show any sign of having ever been in. So there's a similarity. Another similarity. They are both saved by, we'll use the phrase, an angel. Now, sometimes in the Old Testament, an angel could be God himself, but the phrase is an angel. All right? Another similarity. They both didn't worship anyone but God. Or make it positive. They both worshiped God. And finally, they both convinced the king. The king started out angry at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He started out happy with Daniel. But by the end of it, they both were convinced. They both had some belief in God. All right, now we're going to end the chapter with another empire leader of the world recognizing God. Let's read it. Power. You're welcome.
But even though an angel said it was still God.
That's right. That's right. Yep.
Verses 3 and 4 and 21 and 23 give you an idea of the salvation and the reason that he was saved.
3 and 4 and 21 and 23. Then Daniel became distinguished above the high officials and satraps because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Then the high officials and the satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom, but they could find no ground for any complaint or fault because he was faithful and no error or fault was found in him. And then he describes himself after this event. My God sent his angel and shut the lion's mouth. They have not harmed me because I was found blameless before him and also before you. I have done no harm. So Daniel was blameless and faithful to God and man, government and God. Now we're going to see another world empire leader recognize God. And if you want to, you could compare chapter 3:29 to what we're about to read. You can compare Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 3, and who are we looking at in chapter 6? Darius. So two completely different empires, but similar reactions. Let's read. Then King Darius wrote to the peoples. Remember, what did Nebuchadnezzar do? He wrote a letter and told everybody. Nations and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is a living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed. His dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. That very last phrase in verse 26 is kind of the point of the whole book of Daniel. His kingdom shall never be destroyed. And so over and over in Daniel, we keep seeing visions, and what are the visions always of? All these world kingdoms that come and go. And God's kingdom will never be destroyed. All right, so let's answer some questions here. We're comparing Nebuchadnezzar to Darius. One tells what not to do. The other tells what to do. So here he tells us people are supposed to do what in verse 26? Fear and tremble. So that's what to do. And in chapter 3, he told us what not to do, or he told the world what not to do. Nebuchadnezzar said, therefore I make a decree, any nation, people, language that speaks against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And then he talks about how them and their houses will be killed and destroyed. So what not to do? Don't speak against God. What to do? Tremble and fear before God. Point C. He is the living God is found 15 times in the Old Testament and 15 times in the New Testament. I have a list here of all of those times and what they're referencing, but I wanted to keep moving, so I didn't put it in your notes. But when we find that through the Bible, almost every time it is a great miracle, or it's a comparison between the true living God and the gods of idols, showing how powerful God is. So when you see that phrase, what was the phrase? Living God. Look at the paragraph. Look at what's going on, because that's an important phrase. Anytime in the Old or New Testament the phrase living God is there, it's either a great miracle has just happened or God has just shown that idols aren't as powerful as him. All right, Calvin. Calvin's going to come around and pass out the next chapter. Our homework for chapter 7, I still want you to work on it, even though we're going to start chapter 7 tonight, because it's going to really help you understand the chapter if you put it into that big list we've been working on, where the whole book has the same kingdoms being talked about. That will help you understand this so well. I'm going to tell you the truth. This chapter takes us like 9 pages to go through this chapter, and it can be extremely hard and extremely confusing, but because we've been continuing to look at that list, it's actually really simple because it's the same kingdoms. Before we even start the chapter, what were those kingdoms that we've been seeing over and over? What's the first one? What's the very first kingdom? Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom is Babylon. All right, what was the second one? Medo-Persia. What's the third one? Greeks. What's the fourth one? Romans. And then there's not always, but if there's a fifth one, it's God's kingdom. I'm not going to use it a ton, Bryce, but why don't you just bring up that generic slide that helps show what chapter we're going at? Thank you. He knew what I was going for, didn't he? Before I ever asked. All right, before we start chapter 7, I'm going to go ahead and give you a chapter 6 quiz right now. So let's do our quiz. How often did Daniel pray? 3 times daily. Did the king want to punish Daniel? No. And my wording that I used a long time ago, and I guess I'll still use it, is he was duped. He did not want to. He was tricked. Number 3, what empire is Daniel the ruler of in chapter 6? Medo-Persia. Yep. And now, chapter 2, what image was the Medo-Persians represented by? Say it again. Oh, okay. Not in chapter 2. Good thoughts, though. Good thoughts. Got your head, shoulders, knees, and toes. It's a statue of a person. Which part is the Medes and the Persians? The shoulders. The shoulders. Okay? So if you remember that from chapter 2, that's who we're seeing in chapter 6. Now, everybody remind me of what we saw in chapter 2, because if you understand chapter 2, chapter 7 is going to be easy peasy. Okay? Chapter 2, what was the head? Gold, and who was it? Nebuchadnezzar, specifically Babylon, his nation. The chest and arms was who? Medo-Persia. Who was the stomach and the thighs? Greeks. Who was the legs and the feet that were partly clay and partly iron? Romans. And what was God going to do? He was going to make something. What? A stone. And when the stone hit it, what would happen to the statue? It will all come crashing down. If you remember these things, each chapter will get easier and easier. Okay? Because it's the same 4 empires. Okay? So, chapter 7, if you picked up this chapter and you read it before we started this class, 85% of you would have no clue what was going on. Okay? But right now, I think you're so ready for it that it's going to be a lot easier. Daniel chapter 7. We're going to divide the... let me remind you where we're at. Daniel chapter 7 is under whose empire? Whose reign? Belshazzar. Who was Belshazzar? Okay. And Nebuchadnezzar is what country? Empire? Babylon. So who is Belshazzar? Babylonian. So we're back to the Babylonians again. We went back in time for chapter 7. Chapter 7, we're back to Babylon again. So if I was going to make an image, let's just pretend I'm Daniel, and God's going to give me an image in chapter 7, what would be the first nation? Babylon. Because we're back to Babylon again. Okay? Now, what would be the second nation? Medo-Persians. What would be the third nation? Greeks. What would be the fourth nation? Romans. Y'all haven't read a word of the chapter and you already understand the whole chapter. Isn't that great? Okay. Y'all can go home now. You already understand. Chapter 7 starts off these visions. Prophetic. What's our book of prophecy in the New Testament? Revelation. The literal Greek word is apocalypse. And so we call this type of, Revelation, not Daniel. We call this type of books apocalyptic literature, which just means it's going to sound like Revelation. Okay? So when you read Daniel chapter 7 through 12, it's going to sound just like the book of Revelation. It's going to be prophecy. Now, I'm making my point way too long in this little introduction, but I want you to understand where we're going. When we studied the book of Revelation, we had a rule. Here's the rule for the rest of the Bible. Let me give you the rest of the Bible and see if you can remember the Revelation rule. When you're reading the Bible, always assume everything is literal unless it can't be. Now, what's the rule for Revelation and for prophecy? Okay. Always assume everything is figurative unless it can't be. So when you're reading a chapter 7 through 12, a prophecy, think nothing in this chapter is literal unless it has to be. Because prophecy takes the opposite rules. Everything else in the Bible, always assume it's literal. Noah and the ark, how big was the ark? Literal, okay? But something like this, always assume every number, all of that is a symbol of something. Let's read. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, so we went back in time, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in bed. Now remember, all these chapters are not kings seeing visions, they're who seeing the visions? Daniel. Then he wrote down the dream and saw the sum of the material. Daniel declared, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. I'm going to pause you there because y'all have so much Revelation knowledge, you're going to get this already. In the book of Revelation, what was 4? Yeah, that's right. 4 is the number for the earth, like north, south, east, west. It's the number of human things, of created things by God. Okay? Now, 4 winds, when you see 4 winds in prophecy, winds normally mean something turbulent. So you've got earth, difficulty. Okay? 4 winds, but now we're going to see another 4. 4 great beasts coming up out of the sea. So think physical. We're talking physical. Kingdoms, nations, physical things. Different from one another. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. Okay, what would a lion represent to you if you were reading prophecy? What are lions? Power, okay? What about eagle's wings? What are eagles? Strength, okay? And if you want to already be filling in your little blanks. I'm not giving you the answers yet, but y'all are giving me the answers. You notice that? Without me even telling you. Then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. What happened to the eagle? It went from being a beast to being a man. Have we talked about in the book of Daniel someone that was a beast and they became a man? Who was that? That was Nebuchadnezzar, you remember? Nebuchadnezzar, he became like a beast, and he had hair like what? Bird's feathers, right? And then what happened to Nebuchadnezzar when he repented? He became like a man. See, this stuff, it just building on your knowledge of the book of Daniel. Let's keep reading. Then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and the mind of a man was given to it. What happened to Nebuchadnezzar when he repented? His mind was given back. Before, he was given the mind of a beast. After he repents, his mind is given back. He's given the mind of a man. And behold, another beast, a second one, like a bear. It was raised up on one... Okay, what do you think of a bear? What do you think that would represent? What are bears? Beast? Okay. All right, what else? If I said, that's a bear of a man, what would I be saying about him? Strong? Okay, good. And this bear has 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. 3 ribs. We're going to get to number 3 in a minute, but ribs, what are ribs? What is a bear doing if it has 3 ribs in its mouth? It's tearing something up, right? Okay. And it was told, arise, devour much flesh. Now I want you to notice, we had one beast, which was, who's the first every time, guys? Who's the first? Think about the image. Think about chapter 2. Who's the first? Babylon, that's right. Now we've got this bear, so who's second? Medo-Persia. Okay, let's keep reading. After this, I looked, and behold, another like a leopard. All right, who's been number 3 throughout the book? Greeks. After this, I looked, and behold, a leopard with 4 wings of a bird on its back. What's 4 represent? Physical, strong, you know. What did you say? I didn't hear you. Romans? Not yet. We're close. You're close. 4 wings on its back, and the beast had 4 heads. What's 4 represent? Created things, physical things. And its dominion was given to it, and I saw it in night vision, and behold, a 4th beast. Now go ahead, angel. What was the 4th? Romans. A 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful. He doesn't tell us what kind of animal this is. It's just a really scary one. Really, really scary. And exceedingly strong, it had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces, stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. What's 10 represent in prophecy? Complete, perfect, full, a full number, right? So it's got the right amount, okay, of horns. It was different from all the beasts that were before it. It had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. So this has 10 horns, and then a little one pops up and pushes 3 out of its head. Okay? And behold, in this horn were eyes, like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. Okay, I'm going to pause there. Now let's go to your handout. We're just in the dream right now. We've had no interpretation. Y'all have just been doing interpreting because you already know how to interpret prophecy, because you guys are great. Okay? So proud of you. All right, so what's the first thing mentioned? What's number 1 in the dream? Like a lion that had eagle's wings. All right, what happened to that lion? Its wings were plucked off. All right, what happened third to that lion? It was lifted up from the earth and made to stand like a man. And what kind of heart was it given? A man's heart. All right, the second nation that we saw was like a... We're just going down the left-hand column of the notes. Was like a bear, and it was raised up on one side. Okay, we're not even getting to our interpreting yet. We're going to do that next week. But it mentions one side versus another side. What do we know about our second kingdom? Medo, Persia. Do you think maybe if you've got two kingdoms working together, one might be stronger than the other? Yeah. We start out with the book of Daniel. The first time we have Darius, and we don't even talk about the name of the other guy at the beginning of that chapter, do we? Why? It's unequally yoked. You've got two kingdoms trying to work together, and there's always going to be the Medes are stronger than the Persians are stronger than the Medes. So when you got two kingdoms working together, but it's never going to be equal. So he's standing up on one leg, 3 ribs in his mouth. We'll get to what the 3 ribs mean next week because we're not interpreting yet. We're just doing the dream. All right. Our next nation was described as what? A leopard. And what did it have on its back? Wings. How many? 4. How many heads? 4 heads. And what was given to it? Dominion. All right, our final kingdom. The 4th beast. How is it described? Dreadful and terrifying. Exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth. It was devouring and breaking things in pieces. It was trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the other beasts before it. The second description of it was it had how many horns? 10 horns. And I was considering the horn, and then the third description, what happened to the horns? Another little horn came up, and what did it do? It pushed out 3 of the original horns, plucked them out by the roots. And in that little horn, what was in the little horn? Eyes and mouth of a man. Now, we haven't got to the last one, but anytime in the book of Daniel we get to a 5th kingdom, what's always the 5th? God's. We're not there. We're not going to get there this week, but the next thing is going to be one like the Son of Man. What does that phrase mean in the New Testament, one like the Son of Man? Who are we talking about in the New Testament? Jesus. So next week, in the book of Daniel, we're going to get to talk about Jesus. That'll be exciting. So all we've looked at so far is the dream, but do you know how much of that dream y'all already understood before Daniel interprets any of it? You already understood a lot because you understand prophecy. I'm just going to make a very simple takeaway. And then, so we covered the dream. Next week, we're going to start on the interpretation. Simple takeaway. Kingdoms rise and kingdoms fall, but God's kingdom lasts forever. It's greater than them all.